Welcome to Module 14 on proportions. Right now, pause the video and find a writing utensil and a piece of paper. A spiral-bound notebook is perfect for what you'll need for this course. Don't forget that you can use the notes on all your quizzes, and so that's one good reason to take notes. The other is that is how our brain remembers information, is when we write it down. So today we're going to be talking about solving word problems with proportion, and we're also going to solve proportions that form both a one-step and a two-step equation. So you're going to want to turn to a new page in your notebook and write a note for yourself at the top that we're on Module 14 for proportions. You need a new topic, solving a proportion to create a one-step equation. A proportion is made up of two fractions equal to each other. So you're going to want to pause the video and write that down. And then after you've written that down, you want to write down, to solve a proportion, you're going to cross multiply and then isolate the variable. Cross multiply, then isolate the variable. So some of you have only learned this when these are multiples of each other. That is not the case for something like this. I can't multiply 4 by a whole number and turn it into 10. The easier way to do that is to cross multiply. And when I say cross multiply, I mean cross multiply in an X shape. So I multiply things that are on the diagonal. So I can do 4 times 5 and get 20, and 10 times y and get 10y. Now notice I've created a one-step equation, so I can just divide both sides by 10, and I now see that y is 2. There's a lot of concern always over how you set this up, and the reality is it doesn't matter. As long as you do 5 times 4 and 10 times y, you could have switched sides. 10 times y could have been 10y, 5 times 4 could have been 20. We still divide both sides by 10, and we still at the end have that y is 2. You pause the video and try this one on your own. You should have cross multiplied in a diagonal. 6 times w is 6w, 9 times 4 is 36. This is now a one-step equation where we can divide both sides by 6, and so w equals 6. So every time you solve this, you want to check and make sure that you're recognizing a proportion. Remember, it's a proportion is made up of two fractions equal to each other. If there's not an equal sign in the middle, then it doesn't work. Like if this said 17 over 13 times 6 over x, I cannot cross multiply. We've already learned how to solve a problem like that. We would multiply straight across. That's a multiplication problem. This is a proportion, so we can cross multiply. The things that are on the diagonal go together. 17 times x is 17x. I don't know what 13 times 6 is in my head, so I get my calculator out. I do 13 times 6, and I get 78. I've now created a one-step equation, so we're going to divide both sides by 17. The 17s cancel out. 78 divided by 17 comes out as a decimal. So I am just going to rewrite this as a fraction, and there are no common factors for 78 and 17, so I stop there. You pause the video and try this one on your own. You should have recognized that you had a proportion, two fractions equal to each other. Now we're going to cross multiply. 11 times 8 is 88. 13 times y is 13y. We're going to divide both sides by 13. The 13s cancel out. 88 over 13 cannot be reduced or simplified, so we're going to write that as 88 over 13 equals y. If that bothers you, you can always flip it around and write it as y equals 88 over 13. Now, new topic, solving a proportion to create a two-step equation. So write your new topic at the top and underline it. And then you have a new step here. We want to use parentheses to group expressions together before we cross multiply. So for example, these are all just whole numbers. 6, 2, and 9 are fine. But that is an expression, which means I need to multiply 9 times all of that. And I can use parentheses to help me do that. That'll help me remember that I need to do 9 times u and 9 times negative 3. So that becomes 9u minus 27 equals 12. This is the type of problem exactly that gives you the reason why some of you learned from your elementary or middle school teachers that you can solve a proportion by cross multiplying and then dividing. That doesn't always work, especially in this case, because what are you supposed to divide? This actually creates an equation, so we have to add 27 to each side. I get 9u equals 39. I'm going to divide both sides by 9. The 9's will cancel out. You're left with 39 over 9. 39 is not divisible by 9, I don't believe, but 39 and 9 are both divisible by 3. 39 divided by 3 is 13, and 9 divided by 3 is 3, so we needed to simplify that fraction. You pause the video and try this one on your own. Don't forget to group your expression using parentheses. You should have cross multiplied. We do 2 times x minus 2 and 5 times 3, which is 15, and make them equal to each other. We're going to distribute the 2 to get rid of the parentheses, so we have 2x minus 4 equals 15, and this is now just a two-step equation. We add 4 to each side, so 2x equals 19. Divide both sides by 2, so the 2's cancel out, and we end up getting x equals 19 over 2. Same topic, you don't need to create a new topic. We do need to group our expressions together. Notice now that we have two variables. It's not going to change how we solve this. We still cross multiply. Negative 28 times x is negative 28x. That's those two together. And then we're doing negative 20 times x minus 2. We still distribute to get rid of the parentheses. So that's negative 28x equals negative 20x, and then negative 20 times negative 2 is positive 40. And then we need to use our good equation solving skills. We've got x's on both sides. It doesn't make any sense to clear off this side and leave nothing left. So I'm going to move the negative 20x over to the left instead by adding 20x to each side. Negative 28x plus 20x is negative 8x. Negative 20x and positive 20x add to be 0, so those cancel, and we bring down the 40. Now we're down to just a one-step equation. We divide both sides by negative 8. The negative 8's cancel, and 40 divided by 8 is negative 5. You pause the video and try this one on your own. Don't forget to group your expression in parentheses. This becomes 14 times x plus 5. Those two are multiplied. And then the 2 on the other diagonal are multiplied. 24 times x is 24x. I'm going to distribute to get rid of the parentheses. So that becomes 14x plus 14 times 5, which becomes 70. And that equals 24x from each side, or excuse me, on the right-hand side. We're going to subtract 14x from each side to get the like terms together. Those cancel out. You're left with 70 equals 10x. We're going to divide both sides by 10. No reason to make a fraction here. 70 divided by 10 just becomes 70. So x should have equaled 7 there. All right, new topic, solving rational equations. A rational equation is one where there is a variable in the denominator of a fraction. So remember, you're always writing down what I underline. There's a variable in the denominator of a fraction. If we remember that we can solve any proportion using cross multiplying, these types of equations become much easier to solve. So think back to what we learned about whole numbers. Is there a way to rewrite a whole number as a fraction? There is. I can rewrite this as 2 over 1 equals 14 over w. Now I have a proportion that I can cross multiply and solve. 2 times w is 2w, 1 times 14 is 14. That's just a one-step equation, so I divide both sides by 2, and so w equals 7. Same thing for this one. Oh, it's almost a proportion, but not quite. It has an equal sign equal to a fraction. I can also make the 7 into a fraction, and now I have a proportion. I can cross multiply. 7 times y is 7y. 1 times 42 is 42. We have a one-step equation that we solve using division. 42 divided by 7 becomes 6, so y equals 6 there. Sometimes we have some negatives, and so we want to keep an eye on those. When you have a negative with a fraction, if you have, for example, negative 1/2, that negative can be in the middle, it can be on the top, or it can be on the bottom. What it cannot do is be on the top and the bottom because there's only one negative in the problem, not two, and a negative divided by a negative becomes a positive. So it's the same idea here, and I usually end up putting my negative with my number. So instead of having it be just in the middle or with the w, I'm going to rewrite that as negative 3 over w. And then I want to rewrite this as a proportion, so I'm going to make that negative 6 over 1. We're going to cross multiply, so we get negative 3 equals negative 6w. And be careful about your division. The small number is on top. I cannot divide 3 by 6. What that's going to give me is negative 3 over negative 6. The negatives cancel, so that becomes a positive. And 3 and 6 are both divisible by 3, and so that reduces to 1/2. So W equals 1/2 there. You pause the video and try this one on your own. You should have recognized that you have almost all the pieces you need of a proportion, except that we want to rewrite this as -6/1 because we need two fractions equal to each other. We're going to cross multiply. 9 times 9 is 1, or excuse me, 9 times 1 is 9. -6 times W is -6W. We're going to divide both sides by -6 so that the -6's cancel out. And then we're left with a fraction, 9 over -6. I'm going to reduce. 9 and 6 are both divisible by 3, and so we end up getting -3/2. Remember, it doesn't matter where the fraction goes as long as you just have it there one time. All right, new topic, word problems and proportions. Proportions can be used to solve any problem where we compare two rates. So I would at least write down compare two rates. So what you've got here is one rate for Carmen. Carmen drove 290 miles in 5 hours. Labels make this much easier for me to solve because I need to line things up. If I'm comparing two rates, I want those rates to be equal to each other, which means if I put the miles on the top, I can't put the 754 on the bottom. I need to put the miles on the top where the miles are like this. I don't know how many hours that's going to take, so that's where I put my x. So I cross multiply, I get 290x equals 5 times 754, which is 3,770. We're going to divide both sides by 290, and we find out that that's going to take 13 hours. Which makes sense. This is more than twice as many hours, and so it's more than twice as many miles. You pause the video and try this one on your own. You should have set up your first rate as 14 inches of wire going with 42 cents. And then at the same rate, how much in cents will 47 inches of wire? Well, the inches went on the top, so I'm going to put the inches on the top here. The cents is what's on the bottom. We cross multiply, so 14x equals 42 times 47. That gives me 1,974. We're going to divide both sides by 14. The 14's cancel out. 1,974 divided by 14 is 141. So it's 141 cents, which is a weird way of saying $1.41 like that. All right, you might want to write down some code words. Same topic, you don't need a new topic, but you might want to write down some code words for a rate. The last two problems we worked on actually said rate. This one does not, but I see the word proportional, which tells me, hey, you're probably going to be using a proportion here. It says, suppose a patient weighing 159 pounds, and the abbreviation for pounds is LB, so that's what I'm going to use there. And that requires 212 milligrams of medicine. So I've got pounds on the top and milligrams on the bottom. I want to keep that consistent over here. What is the amount of medicine required by a patient weighing 129 pounds? So we have a smaller patient, and so I need to find out exactly how much medicine I need to use. And this is actually a problem that doctors and nurses do all the time. We're going to do 159 times x because we're cross multiplying. We're going to do 212 times 129, and that gives me 27,348. We divide both sides by 159 to solve my one-step equation. Divided by 159 gives us 172 milligrams of the medicine. This one tells us the rate, so we know we can use a proportion for that. You pause the video and try this one on your own. You should have set this up as the first rate being 355 miles, going with 17 gallons of gas. At the same rate, how many gallons of gas would he need to drive 284 miles? So we put the miles on the top, the x is on the bottom, and we cross multiply. We get 355x equals 284 times 17. That gives us 4,828. We're going to divide both sides by 355. The 355 cancel out. We get 4,828 divided by 355, and I get 13.6 gallons of gas. So somewhere in between 13 and 14 gallons. Now, sometimes we might have to solve this a step further when we're done. So it uses the word ratio, so that tells me that the ratio of men to women working for a company is 3 to 5. So in this company, for every 3 men, there are 5 women. That doesn't mean that there are only a total of 8 people. What that means is if I could separate this out into groups, I could have in one group 3 men and 5 women and have all the groups be the same. But there are actually 135 women working for the company, not 5. So we put the 135 on the bottom and the X on the top. We're going to cross multiply. So 135 times 3 gives us 405 equals 5x. We're going to divide both sides by 5. And so x equals 81. Now you want to be careful here. If you've done your labels correctly, that is 81 men. Remember, it was men on top of the fraction? But this question says, what is the total number of employees? Well, there are 81 men plus 135 women for a total of 216 employees. You pause the video and try this one on your own. You should have noticed that you had a ratio here, that the ratio of yes votes to no votes was 5 to 8. So for every 5 yeses, there were 8 noes. So there were more noes than yeses. That doesn't mean there's only a total of 13 votes, though. That means if I were able to split the votes up into equal groups, each group would have 5 yeses and 8 noes. What I actually have is 4,384 no votes. And so I want to find the total number of yes votes by cross multiplying. I'm going to do 4,384 times 5. That's going to give me 21,920 equals 8x. We're going to divide both sides by 8. And I get x equals 2,740. But remember, this is the total. This is the yeses. There were 4,384 yeses noes, plus 2,740 yeses. So we need to add those together to get the total. So if you see that word total, that's telling, or all together, that's telling you that you have one more step to do there. And that's it. You're done with this module. This video will be available on Haiku if you need to rewatch, and will be available on each skill for Module 14 in ALEKS. You should now complete Module 14 practice problems in ALEKS. Don't forget you do that by selecting Continue My Path, and if you've gotten behind, you'll need to catch up on Modules 1 through 13 in order to get to Module 14. If you need help, you can click on the explanation for each problem. And when you're all the way done with the practice problems, then you're ready to do quiz 14 in your assignments. All right, thanks so much.